Hello, everyone. Thank you, Bree, for starting the session. It's a fantastic day in Boston, and we're very, very excited to be delivering session number 3 of this series that is brought to you as a collaboration of Berklee Global Initiatives and Global Music Institute. We're up to session number 3, and we had a lot of engagement. We met a lot of folks, and things have gotten very, very exciting. Session number 2 of this series is called Distribution and Release for Songwriters with a focus on Indian subcontinent. So in session number 1, we were able to talk about songwriting. You were able to share with you tips about the songwriting process. And then session number 2 was about production for the songwriter. And now we are in session number 3 with the focus on release and distribution. And then we're gonna see you all in session number 4, where we're gonna run a critique of your submissions, of your music that you had a chance to create by listening to the tips and the guidance of Berklee and Global Music Institute faculty. So you met me before. My name is Daniel, and unfortunately I wasn't present for the past session, but I will be in session number 4. Just like you, I'm a musician. I'm the Associate Director of Berklee Global Enrollment Initiatives, and this is my contact information, and this is my QR code to something, which I believe it's Instagram or Spotify or a bunch of other things. So please keep in touch. One thing that I like to share, I was in Tokyo and Singapore about 10 days ago. Actually, I was in Singapore, and I met folks that are attending from Singapore this series of seminar, and I just thought that was really, really cool and exciting. So hello to you all, and thank you again for being here. And a huge thank you goes to our Global Music Institute colleagues and faculty who helped us so much and supported this whole series. So thank you all, and thank you again, Adi and Mega, and everybody who's going to be joining the session. And then I'm going to share a little bit more information about what this session is going to look like. I know there has been a lot going on, a lot of content shared. So as I mentioned in session number 1, the participants who are able to attend all 4 sessions will receive a co-branded certificate for the series that is co-branded by Berklee Global Initiatives and GMI, okay? Also, at the end of the presentation, my colleague Brita Yefero, she'll be able to share a link that you can use to submit your works, right? Now, there are some guidelines for the submissions of this of your music, right? You can only submit one link. You can ideally you'll be submitting a link to your music, and then you can upload one attachment, which should be the lead sheet of your music, so that we can take a look at what you've been working on and what you've been focusing on music wise, right? Then we're going to use the time between this session and session number 4 to review all the submissions that come in, right? So Bree and I are going to be very, very busy. Actually, we all are going to be very, very busy reviewing your submissions. And then we're going to choose a handful of submissions for session number 4, and we're going to be running a critique session with Berklee faculty Valerie Orth, right? Of these works that have been chosen for session number 4, we're going to announce 3 winners. And these 3 winners will be announced in session number 4, and then it will then be featured on Global Initiatives and GMI's website, as well as social media. So all of this is really, really exciting. But again, without further ado, I know that I talk too much. I'd like to pass the virtual mic to to one of the best people I know and my colleague, Assistant Director of Global Enrollment Initiative, Brita Yefero. Please take it away, and I'll see you all in session number 2. Thanks again to GMI, and thanks again to Atul and Manojna, who are going to be delivering the session with us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Daniel. So yeah, we'll be sharing that link for the song submissions at the end of the session, and we can't wait to hear what you all have been working on as part of the series. So as Daniel said, my name's Bree. I'm so happy to see everybody here today, and thanks for telling us where you're coming from in the chat. It's always so exciting to see all the places that people are joining us from. You can connect with me by scanning that link right there, the QR code on the screen. Stay connected with us to see all the other different programs that we're running throughout the next couple of months. We're doing online webinars like this one, and we also are doing in-person events throughout different countries. So we hope to see you either online or in person sometime. If you want to take a moment right now to scan the code and register for the fourth and final session, which is coming up in just a couple weeks, you can do that right now at that code right there on the screen. That'll take you to the registration. So as Daniel said, you need to be at all 4 sessions to get that certificate of completion at the end. All right, so now I would love to introduce our guest presenters for today's session. So our session today, our guests will be Atul Churamani, Manojna, Yeluri, and of course we have Adi from Global Music Institute, who has joined us for all of these sessions so far. So I want to tell you a little bit about our other guests for today. So here's a little bit about Adi, who, if you've joined us for the first 2 sessions, you've seen him present. So Adi is a multifaceted musician and educator, and is the co-founder and director of GMI, the Global Music Institute, and is also the project director for ASOSE Delhi government. Adi's work has transcended stylistic and international borders and has been featured on BBC Asia Beats, MTV Coke Studio, BBC Radio, Rolling Stones, GQ, The Guardian, many more. So you can connect with Adi at the code right here on the slide. Next, I would love to introduce you to Atul Churamani. He joined the Indian music industry in 1987 and has worked with music labels like CBS Gramophone Records and Tapes, Magnasound India, Virgin Records, and Saregama India. He has been at the forefront of establishing the digital and music publishing businesses in the industry and has been on the boards of the Indian Performing Rights Society and the Phonographic Performance Ltd. He is the managing director of Turnkey Music and Publishing, which is among the only standalone Indian music publishers. So welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. And I want to also introduce Manojna, who is an artist rights, entertainment, and intellectual property rights lawyer. And she runs Artistic License, which you can see right there, follow on Instagram, which is a legal consultancy and platform that addresses the needs of independent artists and creative practitioners. She's also the Asia Regional Representative for PEN America's Artists at Risk Connection Program. So we're so excited for this session today. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Adi.
Thank you, Bree, for our wonderful introductions. And thank you, Daniel, for kicking this off. And once again, everybody, so nice to see all of you here. Those of you who are joining us for the first session this time, or the ones that, who've been with us through these last sessions. So welcome back again. But more than that, I want to extend a big warm welcome to our very special guests, Atul and Manojna. I've had the pleasure of knowing them for many years and working with them. So they just bring with them such a wealth of knowledge. So I'm really, really thankful that you both took out the time to be with us today and join in this session. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Adi. It's a genuine pleasure.
Thanks, Adi. I was waiting for ladies first.
Okay, so yellow team. Okay, so yellow team is really, sticking together. Great. So I think what I'll do is I'll quickly recap some of the things we spoke about and talk about what are the sort of next steps that we are doing. So the first session we spoke about songwriting, and a lot of you attended that, where we spoke about lyric writing, what are the tools and techniques that we can use to shape our songs better, or in the way that we would like to take them. And then in the second session, we spoke about production and looking at various styles of production, why we need to look at pre-production, how do we plan, and all those aspects that while we are looking at producing our song. Now, today, our focus is on distribution and release. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Can Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Great. So today we're focusing on distribution and release, which is once your song is ready, what do we do next, right? Now, when we are doing something like that, we've already introduced our guest, so I'm going to go ahead. We are preparing for a song release. So how do we look at that? Usually the idea is that we're so busy as artists and creators that we're just focusing on the recording, on the mastering and production, all of that stuff. And then when it comes time to release a song, a lot of our business ends are not sort of tied there. We have a lot of loose ends. So one thing that I try to do, and I also recommend a lot of artists to work with, is set up a timeline. So if you have a release coming up, work backwards 6 to 8 weeks at least, because there's so many things that we need to take care, even if it's one song. How do we sort of work with that? And ideally work with a T-minus approach, which is, you look at, okay, 1 month before the release, these are the things that I need to have together. 2 months before the release, these are the things I want to have together. So that way, what happens is that everything lines up in time. It's not like, tomorrow your song is going out and you don't have the artwork, or, there's something you need to put your lyrics somewhere and then you don't have the text file and you're like totally losing your mind. So it's best to get everything together in time so that all your assets are all in one place. Before we do that, the first thing we need to look at is we need to find the right channel to distribute or launch our music. So if you're going with a label, then obviously the label will guide you. They will have their own distribution company usually that they work with, and they will have certain sort of guidelines of what kind of song formats they need. Is it WAV file or is it AI? Whatever they submit, they'll give you all those guidelines. But if you're going on your own, when we want our music on, let's say Spotify, Ghana, Apple, Savan, there's like so many digital service providers. We need a distribution company that is going to help us launch our music globally, right? So this is where we look at, DistroKid, TuneCore, Horror, CD Baby. Like there's like a list of 50 of those. Now you will have to do your research, see what works in the market that you're targeting, what is your target audience, and then what are the sort of pros and cons that people are providing, what are the the companies providing, what works for you. You will have to do a bit of research. And when I get Atul and Manojna come on, maybe I'll ask them also if they have any tips for us to look at how to sort of find a good distribution company or a label when we're releasing our music. But this is something to keep in mind. Once we've decided that, I would advise you to put a folder of assets where you put all the different things that you would need for your release in one place. I've experienced issues where a lot of my assets are on one hard drive and that drive is lost. So I would highly recommend use a cloud-based service. Google Drive, Dropbox, anything, wherever you are, you may be on tour and somebody asks you for, a high-res photo, or they want, another sort of press release or something, and then you're like, oh, my computer is in somewhere, and then you are not able to access it. Best have access to it ready wherever you are. Put your final master, meta tagged MP3s at least 320 kbps. Have album art sorted out, high res. Then also have web versions of all of that. Get promotional photos. Usually, if you have a new release coming up, it's good to have new photos if you can do that. But definitely have some promotional photos for your release. Put your lyrics as a doc file in that folder. If you're looking at a press release, please put that there. It's great to have all of that, and then you can target different playlists, press media outlets, influencers with your release, and you can use your press release for that. Always have a few versions of your bio. Sometimes you might need a long version, sometimes a short version. So have different versions of your bio that people are going to use for different settings. And then ideally, if you can have a document, it could be an Excel file or a doc file, where you list out the different playlists that you want to target, influencers, press and media outlets. In that case, then you can see, you can just map out, okay, these are the people I've reached out to, I've heard back from them or not. It's a good way to sort of track that. And then obviously we need a lot of video content if you are putting on social media, if you need behind the scenes content, if you have a music video, have all of that in that folder. So wherever you need it, you can access it. And very, very important, have all your credits and split sheets, everything mapped out in this folder as well. And again, when we go to Manojna, she's going to share why these things are so important. So yeah, that's sort of a quick rundown from an artist perspective. What are some of the things that you need to get together before your release? Now, I think this is something that when we talk about releasing a song, many times we look at, okay, ownership, what are the different rights associated with a song, and publishing. Many people don't even think about publishing, and especially when we look at the Indian subcontinent, publishing is often a very overlooked area. So we have an expert with us, and I would now invite Atul to share with us different ideas where we look at what is ownership when we look at a song and what is the importance of publishing. So I'll pass over the mic to Atul.
All right. Thanks, Adi. You were bang on when you said that people don't think about publishing, and my bank balance sort of reflects that. So, artists will create songs and they'll run all over the place about getting visibility on Facebook and Instagram and putting it out on Spotify and YouTube. But nobody really bothers about this publishing part of the business. And a lot of people actually don't understand publishing. So, I think it's very important to lay the context of what publishing is. And it's really not very complicated, because this is all linked with copyright, which is Manojna's, did I get it right? Manojna's domain. So she'll talk about that. So I'm going to give you a very, let's say, working understanding of copyright and what it's all about from the business perspective. So we are not experts, we are not lawyers, but I've picked up things, over time, which I want to share with you. So the first thing you have to remember is what has copyright? What is copyright in music? So there are three things in music that contain copyright. Okay, when you say music has copyright, what do we mean? There are three things that have copyright. One is the composition, one is the lyric, and one is the resultant sound recording of the composition and lyric. So these are the elements of a song, as they're called, which have copyright. There is another right, which is the performer's right, which is actually not linked to the song itself, but is the performance of the artist in the song. So what we'll do is, I think if I can share some slides. Let me try and take people through what this music publishing business is about. Can you see my screen?
Yes, looks great.
Yes. All right. Okay. There we are. Okay, so what is publishing? So simply put, it's the commercial exploitation of the composition and lyrics of a song. All right. So like I said, there are three things that have copyright. This is the composition and lyrics part of the business. Is it connected with the label business? Yes, it is connected with the label business, because when a recording is played, right, there is the composition and lyric that gets used. All right. So it's like my favorite example. If you're eating bharta, there is bangan that goes into the bharta. Okay. You can't eat bharta without eating the bangan. So similarly, think of a composition and lyric as the bangan, which goes into the bharta, which is the sound recording. So nobody can consume the sound recording without consuming the composition and the lyrics. Every time the sound recording is consumed, the composition and lyrics are consumed and generate money for the composer and lyric writer. All right. So that part of the business that deals with the composer and lyric writer is actually what the music publishing business is about. So this is the relationship between publishing and the label business. And if you look at the business internationally from the developed markets, you've heard of entities called Sony, Warner, and Universal. They are the majors. The majors all have two companies within their organizations. One is the recorded music company, which is the music label. Those are the guys who deal with artists. So it is, let's say, Sony Music that used to deal with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson was signed with Sony Music. Sony Music's interest was to sell the sound recording, sell as much of the sound recording of Michael Jackson's work as possible, right? However, it wasn't necessary that Michael Jackson's songs, so if you guys have heard of a song called Off the Wall. Off the Wall was sung by Michael Jackson, but the song was written by a man called Rod Temperton. He did the composition and lyrics. Michael had nothing to do with the composition and lyrics. Rod Temperton was signed with a music publisher. So therefore, Sony Music itself has Sony Music Publishing, which is a separate entity from recorded music. And why that happens is very simple. It's common sense, because when there's one recording of a song in the market, all the money will go to that recording, which means to the artist and to the label. However, if there are more recordings of the same composition and lyric, then more money starts accruing to the composer and the lyric writer and the publisher. So it's in the interest of the publisher to have more recordings in the market, whereas it's in the interest of the music label to have only their recording in the market. So that's the inherent conflict in publishing and the label business, which is why they segregate the business. And also, it's a portfolio game when you do a signing. So an artist signs with a label and says, okay, I'll sign with you for 3 years. In 3 years, we'll release so many songs, etc., etc. With a publisher, it's the same thing. So you say, fine, I'm going to sign you for 3 years. So everything that you compose and write in 3 years is going to come to me. I'll own that and represent that. Now, the fact is that the composition and lyrics created by the composer could run across several music labels. So, for example, it's easier to understand in the Indian context, let's say. If Preetham is composing a song, the recording of Preetham's work could be sitting on Sony Music, it could be sitting on Z Music, it could be sitting on T Series, it could be sitting on Saregama, but the publisher would remain the same in the Western markets. And why Aditya said, my company is one of the only music publishers is because we don't have a record label. Everybody else is a record label that owns their underlying rights. The musical composition and lyrics is owned by the sound recording owner. And their interest is to promote the sound recording and make the publishing money that comes off it. Whereas in the West, in the developed markets, if I'm a composer, I sign, let's say, a 3-year contract with Warner Chappell, which is the publishing company. And then my songs go across Universal Recorded Music, Sony Recorded Music, Warner Recorded Music. So that's the difference between the two. In the context of independent artists, the artist himself is the label, and he's the original publisher of the work. He owns both rights. Now, distribution and technology has been made simple for a music label, which means that the internet is really where you need to upload the song, like Adi was saying. You go to a DistroKid, you go to a CD Baby, you go to a Horus Music, and they will distribute the songs for you on platforms. But what happens with the publishing, right? So like I said, yeah, so when the song is played, blah, blah. So what you have to remember is that there is monetization of the music, the composition and lyrics, which goes beyond just the sound recording. So as an example, if a song is being performed at a live concert, there is no recording. Now that artist could be, let's say, Sonu Nigam. If he is singing an R.D. Burman song, R.D. Burman deserves to get his royalties without any sound recording being played, right? So there is more than just the recording that needs to get monetized as far as the composer and writer are concerned, which is why there are a certain set of rights. There are some copyrights that sit within the composition and lyrics, and it's actually very simple. So, you know, even if we were to look at it from a recording point of view, think of it logically. The first thing you do when you're trying to write a song, when you're trying to create a song, is to compose the lyric and compose the music and write the lyric, right? So in the Indian context, like I keep saying, you'll call, let's say, Javed Akhtar, and you'll call Anu Malik and tell them to create a composition and a lyric, right? The first thing you have to do if you want to take the song out across the world is you have to record the song. So the first copyright, obviously, in a composition and lyric is the right to record that song. And you can record it today as a first recording, or you can record it subsequently over the years, which in India, very interestingly, we call remixes. They're not remixes, they're re-recordings, right? So you re-record the song over and over and over again. You listen to old, songs, Elvis, Can't Help Falling in Love. You know, these songs are recorded many times over across the world. So the first right in the composition and lyrics is to record it. The second thing is that once the song is recorded, it needs to go out. It needs to go out in let's say in the days of physical, it went out as LPs, cassettes, and CDs. I noticed the cassettes on Adi's slide and I was smiling. I wonder how many people actually know what that contraption is. But anyway, so you made a whole bunch of cassettes and CDs and vinyls. You had to make copies, right? So that original recording that sits in a studio has to be made copies of. So that used to manifest in, let's say, physical formats like CDs, cassettes, and vinyls. Today, it is files. It is your WAV files that are made copies of and sit on different computers. But you're still making a copy. Anytime you use music, that's where the word copyright originates from. So some people think it's a joke that Bappi cracked. Copyright means the right to copy. And that's exactly what it means. You can't use any piece of music without making a copy of it. It's not possible, right? So that recording has to be copied. So therefore, you make different files and send them out to different computers. Adi was saying distributors. Your distributor will send out copies to Ghana, Saban, Wink, etc., etc. And then there's the sale and distribution, right? The distribution we just talked about, and there is the sale, which is the consumption. It's either a download or a stream today, etc., etc. Then, of course, there's the public performance right. So like I say, back in the day when we put a lot of cassettes and CDs in the market, how does a consumer walk into a store and know that there is something that I want to buy? And that was done when you promoted the song on radio and television, MTV era, you made music videos, you put them up, you played the songs on radio. So people got to like the songs and they went and bought the physical product. Today, that is also happening with the digital business, right? So promotions are happening on radio. There are still music videos being made. There's today sitting on YouTube instead of MTV. The business remains the same. All right. So there is a public performance. Those songs are being played on radio. They're being played on television. They're being played in establishments. You go to restaurants, you go to clubs, you go to bars, you go to malls. Popular songs are being played there. Then there is the synchronization right, which means that when you do a song and it gets put into an audio visual, into a film, that film could be a first film. So in easy understanding of a feature film, a song is created and it's synchronized with the visual and sits inside the movie, right? At times, the songs are picked up and they're used for advertising, for advertising films. They could be in documentaries, they're your web series. So there's a lot of audiovisual content that is being created today that needs music. And a lot of times, popular music, already released music is synchronized with a visual. It could also be a first, but let's stay with the fact that it's a release song and blah, 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 it's gone into a series. So there's a synchronization right. But the guy who's synchronizing it wants a little change. So, for example, back in the day, there was a movie called Dawn that was made in 1978, which had us with Amitabh Bachchan as the hero. There was a song called Khai Ke Banaras Wala, which was done by Kalyanji Anandji and written by, I think it was Anjan. Indivar, sorry. I think it was Indivar who wrote the lyrics. That song got recreated when they made Shah Rukh Khan's Dawn in 2005. Excel Entertainment did thing. But what they did was, to Khai Ke Pan Banaras Wala, Shankar Ehsaan Loy and Javed Saab were doing the composition lyrics for the soundtrack. They added a rap section in Khai Ke Pan Banaras Wala. So when you listen to the Shah Rukh Khan version, the song from the Shah Rukh Khan version, that has this rap section sitting inside the original Khai Ke Pan Banaras Wala. Now, you can't go to Kalyanji Anandji and say that composition, the rap composition was great, right? It's done by Shankar Ehsaan Loy. The lyrics were not written by Indivar, they were written by Javed Saab. So a portion of the song has to be credited to the new composer and the new writer. And those shares are agreed. The splits, I think Adi mentioned splits. So that's what splits are about. How much of the song did the original guy write? How much did the new guy write? So you divide the ownership of the song on the basis of the creation. So that's what is called an adaptation. So when they say you're going to remix the song, now you have to break it down. You have to step back and say, what does this mean? They are re-recording the song. Is it a faithful re-recording where nothing has been changed in the composition and the lyric? or has something been altered? So there was Ghungru Toot Gaye, which came out recently. Ghungru Toot Gaye had taken the hook from a famous Pankaj Udas ghazal, but the rest of the work was not that work. It was a new work. So accordingly, the adaptation is made and then credited. And then, of course, you have the translation. As you know, songs from, let's say, Roja and RRR have gone into all Indian languages almost. So you're translating the lyrics, which means that there is an adaptation again. The translation is really an adaptation of what the original work was. So when you have an adaptation or a translation, then you have to go through the same process again. You have to record it, you have to reproduce it, you have to distribute it, etc. All these rights are publishing rights. This is how the composition and lyric get used. It gets used and it gets monetized. Every time someone uses your music, they are using one of these rights. So just to also explain that there are rights in the sound recording which are different from rights in the composition and lyric. Okay, so the sound recording, what are the rights? There's a reproduction right, because once you've recorded a piece of music, you can't re-record it. You can't re-record a recording. You can re-record a composition and lyrics. The first thing you can do with a sound recording is you can reproduce it. You can make copies of it. You can sell and distribute it. Again, the same public performance applies. Only in this case, it's not the live shows come in only for the publishing part of it. In a live show where you're using a backing track, then it'll come into play. But if it's a clean, let's say a band playing with a singer singing, there is no recording. So the public performance element then is only the publishing part of it. Here, the sound recording is played in public, on radio, television, in malls, establishments, etc., etc. So that's where revenue generates. And then, of course, you all know about sampling, where they take a piece of music, they put it in a new creation, they sample a piece of the music. So that's how an original recording comes into a new recording and also gets monetized. So this is the entire set of copyrights that exist in music. Anytime someone is using your music, he is using one or more of these rights. And you have to have the ability to know what he's asking for. Don't get confused. So when you're talking about distribution, very clearly you're talking about distribution of the sound recording. And the word publish is it's a very open term. So a lot of people call us and say, hey, we want to publish our music. And you say, what exactly do you mean? Oh, we want to put it on Spotify and Ghana and Wink. That's not publishing. That is distribution, right? So the whole point of this exercise was to explain the difference between publishing and distribution. And about the business itself, publishing is about globally, it's about 20% of the overall business. So if you make $100 on a recording, you make $20 on the publishing part of it, which is why a lot of people, when monies are small, you really don't want to waste your time with dealing with publishing. You have to go register with IPRS, keep registering the works, etc. At the end of it, you say, I'm making $5 off my recordings. Who the hell is interested in making a buck and spending so much of my day doing all this? Which is what a publisher then does for you. And the idea of having entities like distributors, publishers, etc., is that you guys get time to focus on your creations. It's not about trying to run the business. The business is run by professionals. So you have different people doing different jobs. Public performance, for example, it is done by radio. You don't go out there and stand in the street and start singing your song to anyone who's passing by. There's a reason for all these things. So while technology does enable you, you also have to be sure that you're working with partners, like Adi said, to do a little homework, choose your partners, but make sure you're licensing the right things. That Manojna, I want you to pick this up and tell them the difference between selling songs and licensing and assigning songs. Because I'm so fed up of this term saying I sold my songs and stuff. It doesn't work like that. So there is a license and an assignment of rights, which is done for a consideration. That is what the business is about. So now I'll hand you over to Manojna.
Wow, thank you. Atul, that like in, I think 5 or 10 minutes you took us through on this journey, and that was absolutely fantastic. And I urge everybody to, I know there's a lot of information, and I urge everybody to go back, and I hope you took notes, because this is absolutely, yes, people are writing, that was amazing. It was, because see, the thing is that we as artists are so, like, we have such rosy eyed, and we're like, oh yeah, we're writing our music, and we'll put it out there and everything, but then we have no idea of how the business works, and how it writes, and how to sort of get our work monetized, and so many of us are just chasing numbers on streams and all of that stuff, but then we don't understand that how our song and our music being played in different avenues, how we can get publishing and other revenues coming in. So which is very, very important, because as professional composers, songwriters, musicians, this is our bread and butter. So I urge everybody to delve deeper into this. And I mean, Atul is just like, he's a resource. So anytime I have any questions or any concern, like, he is the person that we all go to. So again, thank you, Atul, for sharing that. And I think what we'll do is we'll have a bit more, we'll dive into a sort of a similar area, and then we'll have a larger section laid out to questions. So all of you can then, pick both Atul and Manojna's brains further. So with that, I will invite the lovely Manojna, another person on the yellow team, to come on. And while we do that, I'll share my screen as well.
Thank you so much, Adi. Just want to check that I'm audible to everyone. Yes. I'm not hearing a no,
Yes.
so I'm going to go with
Absolutely. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's been responding in the chats as well. I think that Atul both Atul and Adi have done a fantastic job in establishing context. Really, I think the flow in which we are actually exploring the subject is actually what lends more credibility to the entire discussion that we're having, because we started very much from looking at things from an artist's perspective, from your perspective, to all of you who are actually joining us today. And then again, no surprises at all at how comprehensively Atul has actually sort of given us a landscape view of what is actually a very complicated business. In many ways, I think the interesting thing about the music business is that very often, I think, whether we are entering it as artists or as stakeholders, in the capacity of, say, Atul, who's worn many hats, of course, in the music business, or my story myself, where I've sort of primarily been an entertainment and artist rights lawyer. I think all of us sort of enter this industry with the understanding that it's a really sexy business. There's deals to be made, and it's all gigs, and it's like it's high flying deals, but a lot of it boils down, really boils down to numbers and a lot of paperwork, even the digital version of paperwork. So there's a lot of, it really is a business of that really does a lot of transactions in rights and permissions, if you will, because when you actually sort of, if you're looking to establish yourself and make a career and a sustainable livelihood in this industry, then I think it is important to also remember that you have to have a fair understanding of how monetizing your work, how that actually occurs and takes place, and how very often you will not be able to do it on your own. You might want to DIY your way through it. And again, I think as independent creative professionals, and as somebody who really supports independent musicians, I do believe that there is a certain charm, if you will, and autonomy in being DIY about this approach. But being independent doesn't necessarily mean that you're being isolated. That's my favorite thing to say to people, because again, it's an ecosystem, one that feeds into the other. So before even, I think, touching on music collaboration, I do want to riff off of something that Atul very kindly left me hanging with, so to say, which is something that I'm sure that, as he mentioned, that he has heard time and time again, that unfortunately I have also heard time and time again. And I know from several conversations with Adi that he is as familiar also. So fundamentally, it's very important, especially as emerging musicians, for you to understand the difference between selling your rights and licensing your rights. And the most simplest way in which I can explain things is, think of it as you would with a house, with an apartment. So if you own an apartment, in your case, if you own your song or an apartment, either which way, if you are selling, then how do you go about selling an apartment? When you sell an apartment, it's gone, right? You sign that lease deed, it's over. You sign that sale of agreement, it's over. Once and for all, that house no longer belongs to you. It's very similar in the context of a song or music as well. Once you have sold the rights, you have sold everything. However, when you licensing is very much akin to renting. So for instance, if you are renting, if you're going to sign a rental agreement, what's that going to look like? The rental agreement, usually there's some amount of negotiation, there's rent that you pay every month. The owner of the house, and if you are the one who's renting, then you as the tenant, there are different conditions that the owner might put up. A licensing agreement is very much in the same nature. So when you are choosing to license your music, you are a licensor. Let's just say that you are licensing the music. Then in that situation, you get to control the terms of how you want to rent your music out, so to say. Now, whether or not that happens in reality is a whole other thing, because that really depends on, and I do want to be honest and take off any rose-tinted glasses that we have right now, but a lot of it does boil down to bargaining dynamics, power dynamics in the industry. All the more reason for why you should have a great team supporting you. And a great team, or it doesn't necessarily have to be the best people, it just has to be the best people who can support you and your vision. So they must have a great understanding of what it is that you are trying to pursue. And that can be everything from choosing the right publisher, working with a good distributor, potentially having a lawyer on call, having a good mentor, having a good manager, understanding the difference between a manager and a booking agent. So all these sort of subtle differences and subtle nuances. So very, very simply put, if you're selling, it's like selling a house when you're selling your rights over a song. If you're licensing, it's like renting. It's like renting your rights. So that means that you get to choose the different conditions and the environment in which you choose to license. So now that we sort of have that out of the way, I think that's a very good segue for us to very quickly cover just some of these sort of common collaboration situations, if you will. So in the course of working in the music industry, you will invariably meet people that you want to work with, that you want to create music with. This might start as early as, another really cool student that you met in music school. It might be your neighbor. It might be somebody that you've really looked up to for years, a peer mentor. It could even be somebody that, in case you sign up with a label or a publisher, then maybe somebody who sort of matchmakes you as well. So collaborations happen all the time. And fingers crossed, we're saying goodbye. We're very much in a post-pandemic world, but not so long ago. So 2020, for instance, saw a lot of collaborations taking place, and most of it was happening virtually. So all the more reason for us to sort of dig into the different ways in which collaborations can actually take place. So one of the most popular and sort of sweeping arrangements is what is known as working for hire. So very much it's in the name itself. When you work for hire, I think the simplest way, again, the simplest example I can come up with is if, say, you are a sessions musician and you're sitting in on a session. So usually in that kind of situation, what's happening when you might be collaborating, but the way in which the collaboration works is that you're very clear about your contribution to the particular project or to the particular track that's being made. So in other words, you have managed your expectations. You are sitting in on that session, or you are working for hire, meaning you have been engaged for services with the very specific perspective that you will come, show up, do your thing, and then leave. And this automatically legally implies that you have no stake in the ownership of the final product. So you will basically be paid for your contribution. But if you have agreed to work for hire, then that means that you have agreed that you will not be credited as an owner. You will not receive any kind of legal ownership either. Now, this tends to happen very often. I don't believe that it's necessarily a bad thing. I do believe, though, that, and this holds true for almost anything, I do believe that it's important for all of us to make informed decisions, because what applies or what works for each of us in a different situation, it's purely subjective at the end of the day. So if there tends to be this very common narrative that working for hire is an evil thing, but at the same time, working for hire can be a very, very good thing as well. There are several, for instance, there are several producers who are more than happy to work for hire and offer beats to other producers and musicians, and they're happy to work for hire, and they'd rather not have their names associated with this. So it is an opportunity for you to negotiate maybe for a little bit more money, to maybe wrap up a few different projects that you don't necessarily want to associate with yourself. The primary thing to remember with working for hire is that if you didn't want to work for hire, then you shouldn't say yes. So if you want some kind of stake ultimately in the final product, so let's say that you have collaborated with a friend, you've both written, one of you has written the music, one of you has composed the music, one of you has recorded the music, right? So one of you has written the music, one of you has recorded the music. Now, in that situation, if you as the composer has agreed to work for hire, then your collaborator, once they put the music out there, they are under absolutely no legal obligation to credit you as a co-author of the music. The entire finished piece now belongs to them. So if you wanted to have some kind of stake in this project because that was the spirit of collaboration, then in that situation, you have to probably opt for one of the other two situations, which is the co-writer-songwriter situation or the joint authorship situation. So if we segue again a little bit into co-writer-songwriter, now this really sort of feeds more closely into the kind of landscape that Atul had actually described to us. It is really something that can be a bit more nuanced because you do have a more working knowledge of how publishing rights work, how sound recording rights work, how public performance rights work. And essentially, you're going into this with the idea that I am going to have a stake in this project and I am going to monetize the rights that I have chosen to hold on to. So very much as mentioned here, you do potentially agree to share the copyright of the lyrical and the musical work. Just a quick circle back that when it comes to copyright and a song typically has three copyrights, as Atul mentioned, one in the lyrics, one in the music, those are usually called the underlying rights, and then the final sound recording, that is the sound recording rights, or what we generally know as the masters or master rights. Okay, so coming back again to co-writer-songwriter, this is basically when you have an opportunity to agree on the split between how you're going to own the lyrical and the musical work. And the joint authorship situation really is where you have agreed to equally share the rights and ownership of the musical work and recording. Now, again, with the exception of working for hire, which is often explicitly stated in an agreement that you might come across, everything else is kind of implied and understood. So I think from that perspective, it's also very, very important to maybe actually we can move on to the next slide, Adi, because I feel like this is a good segue. Yes. So from that perspective, it's very good to sort of hold on to certain best practices when you are choosing to collaborate with others as a songwriter, especially if you are an emerging musician in this ecosystem, because it's a really good ecosystem, but you know, it's a business at the end of the day. It's not music friendship, it's music business at the end of the day. So there will be moments when you do need to make sure that you have covered your tracks. So just a few simple best practices, very, very simple things that you can always build on. These are just foundational, to really understand how copyright itself works, and then also making sure that you leverage something known as automatic copyright protection. Okay, so I'm not sure how many of you already know this, but my mind was blown when I learned about this back when I was in law school, which was a very, very long time ago. So typically speaking, you do have to register your copyright formally, etc., etc. However, one of the best things about being in a country like India, and there are several other countries, these are all signatories to something called the Berne Convention. You don't need to know that part. Basically, what you do need to know is that we have something called automatic copyright protection or automatic copyright registration. So what that means is, for instance, this particular slide that Adi has created, nothing stops Adi from putting the copyright, the C copyright symbol and his name against it. And you don't necessarily need any kind of formal registration to support that, because the way in which automatic registration works is that the minute you have created something that satisfies the basics of copyright, which is that it has to be tangible, it has to be fixed, and it has to be original, nothing stops you from claiming a copyright over it. This is very important for you to understand, because a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times, you will meet people in the business who will come up to you and say, oh, but you don't have a copyright over your work. And that's because they want you to think that you don't have a copyright in their work. And I see Atul smiling because this is an issue. This is where you must leverage copyright protection. Sorry, Adi, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm so sorry to, because we were, a couple of people have asked us questions related to that about poor man's copyright. So maybe we can go over that as well, where somebody has said, if you, send a CD of your work, if you still use CDs of your work by speed post, and another person had mentioned about poor man's copyright. So since we're talking about automatic copyright, is it different? Is it similar? And if you can highlight that a little bit.
So thank you for that, actually. And that's a really good question. So it isn't a bad practice per se, but it's also not necessarily, it's more of a myth than anything else. It's a good way for you to protect yourself. I'm not going to say that it isn't. But here, the interesting thing isn't the fact that you've posted it to yourself. It isn't the fact that you've sent it to yourself. Actually, what makes automatic copyright registration here effective is the fact that you have actually distilled it into some kind of fixed format. So a lot of the times when we're brainstorming, things just stay up here. We don't necessarily articulate them. And even when we articulate them, we may vocalize them, but we don't necessarily put them down in some kind of cohesive manner, which could be anything from, say, a recording to maybe music and lyrical notation, all of which are examples of how you can fix something in a tangible format. Now, the poor man's copyright, like I said, it's a bit of a myth, but it only works because you have taken the effort to put it down in some kind of recorded format. So you don't have to necessarily mail it to yourself. But what I do recommend is that if you are in the process of writing music, whether you're doing it on your own or with somebody else, because I know, again, a lot of us tend to be very impulsive and we cringe sometimes at our ideas. Do not tear up your notes, do not delete files, don't do that. Hold on to these things, maybe put them somewhere else if you don't want to see them right now, because essentially speaking, what you're doing is you are documenting your creative process. And that is incredibly important for you to be able to legitimize to some extent the automatic copyright registration situation. Before I move on, Atul, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah,
go ahead.
I just want to suggest one thing. You also do have the option of registering an unreleased work, which you've either fixed in a sound recording or you've written something. With the government of India, they have a website, which is www.copyright.gov.in, where online you can register something, either released or unreleased. So, better than mailing it to yourself, that might be a better option. And they charge you 500 rupees per work. So if you're going to register a composition and a lyric, that's $1,000. And it's 1,500 if there's a recording with it. But it's probably a better way than, trying to post something to yourself or saying, email, etc., etc. Because this is a government document that you will get there.
Absolutely. As a matter of fact, that is exactly copyright registration. So again, another myth tends to be that you need a lawyer to help you with copyright registration. You don't. Again, very much as Atul said, anyone can actually go to copyright.gov.in. And this applies across the board for musicians, for visual artists. So for instance, if you have album artwork as well, you can go ahead and, apply for a copyright there also. And what's very interesting with copyright.gov.in is, it's a typical government website, so there's a lot of digging that you have to do. But I would recommend looking for something that are known as, I think, work manuals, and they can help you. There's one work manual that's specific for musical works, and that may be very helpful to give any of you a step-by-step process if you'd like to understand copyright better and then explore how you can register in India. So this is all very India-specific information.
But the other question is, once you've registered a copyright in India, you own the copyright globally, right? That's another question that, so to clarify, it doesn't mean that you only own the copyright in India. If you can just speak to that.
No, absolutely. The way in which copyright tends to work is it's more global. It's not the same case with trademarks. And that's where a lot of confusion tends to happen. And just for anyone who, I mean, of course, we've added now a little bit more into this discussion with trademarks, but suffice to say that a trademark is basically like your brand name. So let's say that you would like to protect the name of your band or your project, then a copyright is not going to do the trick there. There you'll have to apply for a trademark, and that has to be done, that is done basically, it's jurisdiction specific, which is just a fancy lawyery way of saying it's country specific. So yeah, but copyright, technically you're fine. You're okay if you get it copyrighted once. And also copyright, you will see this again in a lot of contracts and terms and conditions. People say perpetuity, but by perpetuity, it basically means, a copyright does expire. And once it expires, it goes into something called public domain, which means that everyone is free to use it then. So perpetuity is not actually till the end of time. It is about 80 years, I think, from the date of publication, right, Atul? Am I being rusty about that?
60 years.
60.
So that's the recording. The recording is 60 years after the year of release. And for composition and lyrics, it is 60 years after the death of the last of the authors.
So that's still a lot of time. That's still quite a bit of time to keep in mind, yes. All the more reason to think about monetizing your rights as well. And I guess I am very quickly going to just maybe touch on the other three, and then maybe I'd like to hand it back to Adi after I'm just done with these 3 points, and then maybe we can go over any questions that anyone has.
Yes, there are quite a few questions popping up, so we can take those for sure.
Okay. Great. Okay. So very, very quickly, and I think much of this has already been mentioned. If you're sampling someone or something, you have to consider permissions. This tends to happen quite a bit. There is, again, I think, another myth about what if I sample something that's below X number of seconds and the like. There's no, that's unfortunately, that doesn't work either. Either way, no matter how many seconds it is, you have to get permission. And sometimes that can be a very confusing business because you also have to make sure that you're getting permission from the right person. If you're getting permission from just anybody, then you're not getting permission from the rights holders. A good example from the independent space is, I think sometime last year or 21, the artist Para Fakuva had made a release with a sample from Latif Khan, but unfortunately there was some miscommunications there. And it turns out that he didn't actually have permission to sample Latif Khan. And then there was another filmmaker who sort of came in the middle, and he was the one who really sort of created the problem. But it turns out even the filmmaker didn't have rights either. So essentially, if anyone's interested, just Google Para Fakuva and Wild City, because Wild City did a really good article about this. And shout out to foundations like Anhad Foundation and organizations like Wavelength, Anisha Kotwani's, that actually stepped in and were able to sort of make the process smoother for everybody. And ultimately, Latif Khan also got compensated for his sample. Again, be very clear about writer credits and producer credits, which goes back to split sheets, etc. And of course, the golden rule, please get into the habit of getting things in writing. It's not a bad idea at all to have things written down. And you don't have to necessarily have a very lengthy, jargon-filled contract. I will say that the more sophisticated your deal is, the more sophisticated the language will also have to be. But honestly, even if you're just collaborating with your classmate, or your friend, don't let anything stop the both of you from having maybe a simple one-pager that just talks about what you want to do with the music. If you choose to put it out there, if you choose to distribute it, how are you going to split the money that comes out of it? How are you going to split royalties, etc., etc.? But put it down in writing. I love to say that contracts and getting things in writing are a great way to have awkward conversations. And if you can use a buffer, you can always use somebody else to help do that. Atul? And I'm done also, Atul.
So I just want to say again, don't confuse the publishing with the master. Because if you're agreeing with your friend that you're going to share royalties, be very specific as to what royalties you're going to share. Because a composer sometimes gets confused with an artist, and people say, oh, but then we are sharing the money, so should I be paying him 50% of what I get on the recording? Now you have to agree to that. There is no unwritten formula here. So don't be embarrassed. It's a better conversation to have in the studio while you're recording than to have it in a court of law many years later.
100% agree. And
Yeah,
Adi, I think the floor is now yours.
No, actually, the floor is, for you both to, so many questions are coming in, but just while we go there, all the things that you mentioned, Manojna, the legal best practices, because sort of we zip past them, and these are such important concepts. I'm just going to link it here again. There's a really nice blog that Mano wrote for our website where she listed this out in a lot more detail, where there are external links and some other resources, because some people were asking about some other resources, some templates, all of those things. So you can check that blog out. But more than that, I would advise you all to please follow these amazing speakers here, because they have a wealth of knowledge, as I said earlier, on their websites, on their Instagram accounts. So please go ahead and follow them. There's a lot of information that Manojna has put on artisticlicense.org, where there are, I think, templates, and then some articles. There's a lot of knowledge that you can gain from there as well. And if you want to follow us at Global Music Institute, this is our website and our Instagram handle. And in case you want to follow me, I've put my links as well. So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll open up to questions, because a lot offline, which is great, which is the idea about these, where we don't want them to be like these lectures that we throw information at you. The idea is for us to be in a room and we can talk about some of the issues and answer your burning questions. So Bree, would you want to bring people in who want to ask questions? Is that how you want to do this? And then the chat questions work as well. I think three of them have raised their hands, so we can see how we want to take that.
Yeah, so why don't we allow folks to ask their questions live? So let's see, it looks like on my list, Siddharth is the first one. So if you'd like to ask a question. All right. Do you have a question for us?
Siddharth, you can go ahead and unmute. Yeah.
And if not, we have a couple other folks that we can try. Aryan, would you like to ask a question to our panelists today? We can also check out some of the questions from.
Yeah, let's do that from the chat.
Yeah, let's check out. We have a couple in there right now.
So I think this is an interesting one. What happens when someone uses your melody and included it in a royalty-free sample pack? Wow. And eventually leading to various people using it. So does publishing your work beforehand will collect your royalties from all those who used it? Oh, that's a tricky one.
Yeah, but how can someone take your music and give it to someone who's giving it out royalty-free unless he has your permission to do it? So it's your decision. I mean, if you're saying royalty-free, then that means royalty-free. That means you're not going to get any money after that. So it's your decision entirely.
Yes, because I think if they've given it to a royalty-free pack, without your permission, in a way they've violated your rights.
Then it's a
If I'm
copyright
There's no,
infringement.
in a way. Yeah, it
Yeah.
straight up is copyright infringement. Exactly.
Mhm.
Yes. So yes, yeah, agreed. Yeah. That's basically, so what you can do, I mean, I guess specifically just publishing your work beforehand help you. It could, because it gives you an opportunity to establish what we've been saying, which is, you can claim automatic copyright registration. But again, just because you do so doesn't necessarily, there is no invisible power in the sky that's going to sort of swoop in and help. So what you will have to do still is you will have to proactively, make a claim for these royalties, etc. So for instance, if it's something that's playing on YouTube, then you will have to sort of trigger those systems to take things down, etc., etc. So, and effectively, it amounts to exactly what Atul and Adi have said. It is copyright infringement.
Yes. So somebody has just posted in the chat where they're a bit hazy about the process of getting your music out there after a master track is ready. One is releasing through services like DistroKid or any other distribution service, but what they're saying is it involves a lot of promotional stuff, artwork, all of that. So yes, I think what we need to that's why I sort of put that list, is because you can't just say, okay, I'm now going to upload an MP3 file. You could do that, but then let's say your song is coming up on iTunes or Apple Music or Spotify, where then there won't be an artwork, or the artist image will be missing. There won't be your bio, and then your social media links won't be linked up there. So I think for that, the reason why we're saying that have all of these things in place. One of the things you could do is that maybe talk to somebody who's released songs and see what have they done, or maybe find a manager who could help you line these things up with that as well. What any
So I
other
just want
advice?
to add, I just want to add to that, Adi. So what happens with a lot of distributors is that they will
Right.
give you specifications. So they will
Right,
tell you
exactly.
what, how many DP the artwork should be. It has to be a WAV file. It can't be an MP3 file, things like that. So you will get a lot of guidelines from your distributor as well.
Exactly. And in terms of promotion, well, that is another whole ball game where you have to look at, if you're using a press release, then you reach out to media outlets. Social media promotion is another sort of, whole ball game that, all content creators are dealing with. Yes.
So there's a way of looking at it. When you DIY, you are your own record label. So all the stuff, if you were signed to a record label that you would hammer the record label for not doing, now the business is yours. So you better start doing it.
Exactly. Now, some people have also. Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Manoj.
No, just a quick line, I guess, just to say that again, I think a simple, it might seem a bit redundant, but I think a simple Google search should yield a checklist of sorts. And then I think very much, you are effectively your own label, you are your own publisher, you are your own manager, you are your own graphics design person. You are everything, basically. But yes, I think having a checklist of sorts and then maybe speaking to other people would be able to give you a little bit more, don't get overwhelmed, basically.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably all I wanted to mention more than anything else.
Yes.
Go ahead.
But actually, it can get pretty overwhelming, when you're just, starting out and you're working on the writing process, production process. Now I have to figure out the release. And that's why we created these sessions to sort of break some of these things down. And obviously, in this such a short amount of time, we can't cover end to end of this, but we're just sort of opening the idea on, and then seeing what other different avenues we can look at this from. Leading from there, some participants have also asked recommendation on good books, because I think books that outline all this information is good to look at, because then you can refer to different areas. So Mano and Atul, if you have any books, maybe for some have asked for the European context, some for India. So yes.
So
Atul is smiling.
I'm not a great reader of books, but there was one that was put in front of me. It's called This Business of Music.
Okay.
It's thicker than most encyclopedias I've seen. So good luck. I never read it.
You are a walking encyclopedia of the Indian music industry, so you don't need to read it.
Just
Yeah.
it's just picking up things as you go along. Really, I mean, there's no rocket science to it. I look at the business and think it's very simple. So the fact is that if you spend a bit of time doing things, you'll understand.
Definitely. Manu, how about you? Any suggestions on your end? So I recently found this, does anybody know Ari Herstand? He's released his third edition of his book called How to Make It in the New Music Business, where
New music business,
that is a really good book that I found. And obviously one of the sort of very highly recommended books overall is All About the Music Business. Is it Donald Passman? I think that is one book that
I think it's all you need to know about the music. The music business. That's the one that I used actually in law school. And I do think that he does a good job of updating the editions as well. But books aside, I mean, if you want to read books, that's amazing. I'm another nerd, so I'm happy to meet people who want to read books. But I think the interesting thing right now is that there's so many different ways in which we can educate ourselves. And I would even expand a little bit beyond books also to maybe look at things like YouTube, because I think there are lots of really good YouTube accounts out there that do a fine job of not just offering really good music business advice, but I think they do a fantastic job of contextualizing it as well. So let's say you're looking for something in the American context, then you can look for American creators. Let's say you're looking for something in the European context. India, I do have to say that I'm afraid there aren't many resources that I would necessarily guide us to. I would definitely like to make a mention of Ritnika's book, because it is Indie 101, if I'm not mistaken, because it definitely is a book that does a good job of contextualizing the Indian music scene, so to say, and really from an independent musician's perspective more than anything else. But again, we have YouTube and Instagram. There are lots of ways. ChatGPT, yes.
Forget about books.
Well, that's a whole other conversation. So yes, indeed.
Just joking.
That is certainly a whole other conversation. I'm seeing another question about marketing as an artist. So from Nandini, do you have any tips on networking and marketing that you've picked up throughout your career?
Adi, I think maybe you're the best one to start that off.
I wouldn't say that I'm a great marketer, but like I struggle with that front a little bit. See, I have sort of released music in the pre-social media era, so a lot of my sort of efforts were done in that sort of way, where there was still, like, we used to send out physical press releases where we would mail them to magazines or all that kind of stuff. So I have that sort of a bit of experience in that way as well. Today, I think majority of it is via social media. I mean, I think that that is the vehicle for marketing on a very large sort of scale. And then with social media, again, like, what happens is that each platform has sort of its own language. Like, Instagram has its own sort of language that it works on. TikTok has its own sort of codes that it sort of operates on, and then cracking those algorithms and all of that kind of stuff. You have to kind of work with it. And then, sorry, my phone is ringing. So that is, YouTube has its own sort of mechanism, what works, what can, and now they've sort of come up with shorts, like YouTube shorts. Before that, YouTube had a lot of long form content that was primarily looked at, and you would sort of promote that. But then they saw that because Instagram and TikTok, they were working with shorter time length, and they were really picking up. So then they came up with YouTube shorts. And then a lot of artists and content makers figured out how to, kind of work with that and increase traction on that front. So I would say that one way to look at it is find the artists that you like and you kind of aspire to be like, and see their model, what works for them, because then if your sound is like that, then your target audience is almost similar. So then they would be on those platforms. One thing that sort of works is that you figure out, okay, how did they crack their fan base? How did they reach out to that? One thing that I think a lot of people miss out on is a mailing list, because we sort of tend to see, okay, social media or Facebook or something else. And by example, when maybe 10 years ago, when we were, when I was releasing certain records, Facebook was one of the key vehicles that we were using. And then Facebook pages were this big sort of thing. And now I don't think anybody cares about, Facebook pages or the numbers that we had. Like, the kind of fee you could charge from festivals and where you were appearing was kind of racked up in terms of how many numbers of fans you had on your Facebook page. But now sort of those metrics translate to Instagram accounts. Like, let's say you're looking to book a festival, and the first thing they do is go and look up your Instagram and say, okay, how many followers you have. So those metrics sort of become, more in place. But a very direct communication method, which is like direct to fan, is your mailing list, which I think is often overlooked, where you can develop a very strong sort of relationship, which I've actually seen many artists develop a big fan base and then, kind of develop that relationship over years with your mailing list. So those are some tips that I can say, if at all. I wouldn't say I have any, a strong marketer in any way. Yeah.
So Adi, I'll just add to that. Today we have to accept that the business has got fragmented.
Yeah.
So I think one very important thing, and you mentioned this, is choose your platform. So it could be genre related, it could be, the artist that you're following, etc. Choose a select number of platforms that you can dominate. Don't try and go across 20 platforms, because you'll spread yourself thin.
Yeah.
Rather, choose 2 or 3 platforms which you think will work best for you, and then spend your time and energy working on those. And the interesting thing about platforms is any of the platforms have tutorials about how to best utilize their platform. So in fact, I was telling Adi that Facebook is doing one with IPRS at the end of March. So there'll be Facebook, Insta, and IPRS talking about how creators can maximize their visibility and maximize those platforms. I think Spotify runs something every week or twice a week on Spotify for creators, etc. Yeah. So there are tutorials on every platform. So choose your platform, learn about the platform, and then dominate that platform. I think that's really the best way to do it, because otherwise you'll get very confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd actually like to add to this as well, because I do think it's a very important question, especially now that we are, fingers crossed again, post-pandemic, and we are back to IRL and hopefully living in real life, even though this session is happening virtually. So I do think that very much there is another additional element as well, because the music business has now evolved beyond music also, so a lot of the times, I mean, this is exactly what the 360 deal is about. It is in recognition of the fact that you are a musician first, true, but you are also many other things as well. So when you're marketing yourself also, I think it's very important to understand the different platforms that you'd like to market yourself on, and also what you would like to market yourself for. And there's no shame in that. I think that it's also very important to mention that as well, because there are a lot of people who look down on a lot of people. Influencer is a bad word for some reason, but I don't think that that needs to be the case at all. It is perfectly fine for you to use your expertise and to leverage your presence on social media, for instance, or different platforms in different ways. For instance, I know musicians who are incredibly quiet on social media, are nothing short of spectacular on SoundCloud, and have landed a lot of very interesting, synchronization and, composition opportunities. The other way around, I know some fantastic musicians who have honestly used their social media presence to also, leverage their career in music as well. And so it's limitless. You can actually go ahead and do whatever you'd like. And on the networking aspect, the only thing that I would like to mention is, as much as you are networking with other musicians, do make sure that you're also networking with musicians outside of your genre and also people who work in the industry as well, because you don't want to be in an echo chamber at the end of the day. And that tends to happen to us a lot. We love our echo chambers because we love patting ourselves on the back and saying, oh, bro, the scene, but don't do that. Like, definitely be that person who steps out of the box a little bit. If you see or meet somebody who, say, I don't know, who is working with music journalism, go and have a word with them. You know, if they're interning at a music publication, you never know. That person might become the person who enjoys your music and then happily writes about your music tomorrow. So just be open, essentially.
Amazing. Thank you for that. Wow. So I think I just saw one question kept coming from a few different participants where, again, I think they're talking, for example, Shivank has said here, Shivank Gupta, I know it's important to copyright, but in case we are releasing it without copyright, in a way, we can still call it a copyright work. And then again, somebody has also said the same thing where, since there are a lot of YouTube single releases these days, does uploading an original on YouTube safeguard copyright automatically for the original? So I think, yeah, if anyone of you want to take that.
I think let Manojna answer that, because I think she said it. Sorry, I'm stumbling over your name. But
No,
but I think there's sense in reiterating that.
Definitely.
Right, of course. So the simple and quick answer is yes, it takes care of things. You don't have to formally register. The minute you have uploaded it also, as long as it's original. Original, by the way, doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be novel and fantastic. And, you know, it doesn't have to be extremely complicated or noteworthy song or track.
Hello.
But it essentially just has to be something that satisfies certain basic ingredients, meaning it's not an identical replica of something that already exists. When you upload things onto YouTube, or even for that matter, any kind of social media platform as well, anywhere online, now a lot of the platforms have inbuilt mechanisms that allow you to take things down. So in case, you know, for instance, with YouTube, it can pick up, basically the algorithm can pick up if there are something, a song that's similar to yours or a track similar to yours, and it will alert you to be able to maybe initiate a takedown process or a strike down or whatever. These, I don't want to get into too much detail here because these processes tend to differ depending on the platform. So you are good to go in terms of putting things up on the platform. The only caveat I will mention also is that platforms are also not absolute. So at the end of the day, you must be aware that technically speaking, there's only so much that even a platform can do, even if it says that it's protecting your rights. So again, there's a lot of criticism about how effective platform takedown mechanisms are as well. So it's a little bit of both, basically. But as I said, the short answer for you is yes, it should be fine. You can go ahead and upload it. For safe measure, put a little copyright symbol next to your name in the description box, etc., like the notes. What do they call? The description box, right? That's what it's called for YouTube, right?
Yeah, the caption.
Yes, I've clearly never uploaded anything on YouTube. So just creepily watching music videos on YouTube. That's what I do. But yes.
Atul sir, I have a question.
Sure,
Hi.
you go get.
You need to
सर
be a
मैं
bit
हिंदी में
louder.
पूछूंगा.
हाँ,
हेलो.
Yeah,
सर मेरा एक
go ahead.
सवाल है कि क्या मैं किसी गाने के ऊपर कोई कमेंट्री या उसको एक्सप्लेन कर सकता हूँ ऑडियंस को, और क्या मुझे उसके लिए उसका लाइसेंस या उसका राइट लेना होगा? क्या मैं उसे मोनेटाइज कर सकता हूँ अगर मैं उसे यूट्यूब पे पोस्ट करूँ? क्या ये फेयर यूज कॉपीराइट के पॉलिसी के अंदर आएगा?
No, because you're monetizing it, it's not fair use. If you were using it in an educational institution, that's different. But for something like this, which you're trying to monetize, you'll have to take permission.
ओके, अगर मैं उसको मोनेटाइज ऑन नहीं करता और मैं उसके बारे में बात करूं, उस गाने को एक्सप्लेन करूं, उसके लिरिकल वर्क को कि उन्होंने क्या इसमें बात कही है, कितना खूबसूरती से उसे प्रेजेंट किया है, या मैं उसकी कॉम्पोजिशन के बारे में बात करूं, तो क्या मुझे लेबल से कोई ऐसा टेक डाउन करने का या ये सब करने का क्वेरी आ सकता है?
So what tends to happen is that the answer to that is it depends on the copyright owner. Some copyright owners might agree, some people may not agree. Then you will have to make the plea whether it's going under fair use or not going under fair use, and it's up to them to say yes or no. So the best way to do it is to actually take permission. Say you're not monetizing it, take permission and then do it, because in one sense you're promoting the song. So they should be happy about it.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody, for all of your questions and for joining us for the session today. Now, I know everybody's been asking about the link to submit your song, so I'm going to share that right now. Right here, if you scan this QR code, you will get our form where we will be accepting your song submissions. And you don't have to submit it today. We're just opening it up today, but they are due by March 6th. So I want to take this time also to thank Adi and our panelists for joining us today. Thank you so much for such an informative session. We will get this video posted. I know some people will probably want to watch it again to really take in all that information. So we'll have that on our YouTube channel in the next couple of days. So thank you so much, Manojna, for joining us.
Thank you, Atul and Manojna, for this enlightening session. It was so nice to just dive deep into these aspects because, as I said, like we are always busy writing and producing music, but then when it comes to release and taking care of our business, this is so important. And one of the, my favorite quotes about this is whenever music gets played, somebody gets paid. So I want to, so we want to be the people who get paid when our music is played, and people like Mano and Atul are the ones who will take care of that. So yes, so thank you for teaching us how to sort that out.
Thanks so much, Adi. Thank you, Bree. Had a great time.
Yes, agreed. Thank you, Adi, and thank you, Bree. And again, as always, it's been a pleasure sharing space with all of you and with industry stalwarts like Atul and Adi. So yes, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, and please be in touch with either Berklee Global or Global Music Institute if you have any questions. And we will see you at the next session in just a couple weeks. Thank you so much.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.